Okay, so hello, and thank you everyone for coming to our panel discussion on global perspectives on sports and society taking place during International Education Week. I want to warmly welcome everyone from Eugene, which is a place that is home for some of us, and past or current home away from home for others. I know that some of our audience members and panelists around the world, for them it's either very early in the morning or very late at night, so we are very grateful to have you all join us from wherever you are. My name is Katie Jo Walter, and I'm the International Alumni Digital Engagement Manager here at the University of Oregon. I'm joined by my fellow UO engagement team members, Michelle Joyce and Kasanat Rustam, who will be assisting with today's meeting. The University of Oregon International Alumni Digital Engagement Team is working to connect UO faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to build a Global Ducks community actively supporting each other through knowledge sharing, through personal and professional networking, alumni involvement in our study abroad programming, formal and informal international events and programming, and more. So we want to make it easier for all Ducks to succeed while celebrating being a part of the UO family. So this session, aside from being on behalf of the International Alumni Engagement Team, it's in partnership with the UO Division of Global Engagement and also Lundquist College of Business. Sorry about that. Okay, so once I introduce our format, our moderators and panelists, they will delve into these questions and into the questions that we have prepared for them, and there will be time for question and answer. Please type your questions in the chat box when you think of them, and we'll ask you to unmute and ask when the time is right. We may take some time in between the discussion to present some questions because I know a few of our panelists are not able to make it for the entire time. So the goal of today's panel discussion is really twofold. Firstly, we're seeking to introduce audience members to international perspectives on the role sport plays in society and social issues in the world of sports. Secondly, via our geographically and professionally diverse panel, we hope to increase awareness of a variety of career opportunities and trajectories that are possible in areas of sport. Specifically, we hope to offer insight into the following questions. What does the relationship between sports and society look like in different countries? What are some of the most important social issues arising in sports and or being addressed in sports communities around the world? What are some professional avenues available for those with strong connection to sports? What has our alumni panelists' relationship with sports looked like before, during, and following their time at the UO? And finally, what is the panel's advice for current students interested in careers related to sport? So now, without any further ado, let's meet our moderators, Mr. Dupree Zong and Mr. Yo Dubinsky. A warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie Jo.
Yes. Moderator Dupree Zong, he got his MBA at the UO in 2015. He's a current Senior Footwear Demand Planner at Nike and is also teaching in the classroom from which he is joining us today. So today's event takes place in a hybrid session of SBUS 250N, Sports Business and Society. It's an introductory sports business class taught in Mandarin with English texts and multilingual assignments. This course is designed to ease international students' transition to an English immersion environment, give them a bilingual introduction to core concepts in the area of study, and ensure their success in English-only courses to come. Mr. Zhang, who himself is from China and a native speaker of Mandarin, is joining us along with his class from one of the brand new classrooms in Tyson Hall, which is home to UO College of Arts and Sciences integrated academic and career advising offices. So students are seeing all of us on two huge screens in the front of their classroom. Dupree, thank you to you and your class for welcoming today's panel in English. And I wanted to find out if you could please share just a little bit more with us about the course you're teaching for the very first time this term.
And thank you, Kate. Oh, there's echoes. Give me a second. Is it better?
No, yeah. Well, no, there's still some feedback. Yeah.
Right, I'll just move. Sorry about that. I'm leaving the classroom. Is it better?
It's fine now, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for having us here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, fellow Ducks. Dupree here, and along with me are the 22 students in the new class, and they're from freshman to senior, mostly from China mainland, but also we have students from Hong Kong and Taiwan. They're taking part in the first of its kind class with lectures in Mandarin, most reading in English, and assignment using both languages. When a student who has studied in a foreign language is first immersed in it and expected to interact with native speakers, it can be daunting, especially in an academic classroom. Non-native speakers, no matter how well prepared, can initially feel intimidated as they adapt to classroom culture and language. Recognizing this, the UO Office of the Provost launched this pilot project this academic year in cooperation with the Language Colleges of Business Popular Sports Business Program. The course was built in consultation with second language acquisition experts from the UFO and worldwide, whose research shows much faster progression to educational success in the target language if facilitated via a brief on-ramp of introduction to the learning environment foundational concept material using the student's native language. So basically, that's why we're having this class, and that's why we're here today.
Great, thank you, Dupree. And I've heard that there's a lot of excitement about this class, and already there are a lot of students asking if it's going to be offered again next year, so you must be doing a great job. Today, our other moderator is Dr. Yov Dubinsky, and he is an instructor at the Lundquist College of Business who has taught the Sports Business and Society class in English for the past 3 years. Yov Dubinsky joined the Lundquist College of Business in 2018 after completing his PhD at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Born and raised in Tel Aviv, Israel, Dubinsky is a sports researcher and sports journalist with over a decade of experience covering and researching sports around the world. His interdisciplinary scholarship focuses on sports, nation branding, public diplomacy, and country image, and especially how countries, cities, and communities try to improve their images and reputation through sports. As a journalist, he's covered hundreds of sports events. Focusing on the Olympic movement, Dubinsky has covered or researched the Olympic Games from Beijing, London, Rio de Janeiro, and Tokyo, several locations from which our alumni are joining us today. He has been involved with the International Olympic Academy as a lecturer, a coordinator, and a student, using sports as a tool for inclusion in diverse international environments. Dr. Dubinsky, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you share a little about the importance of this topic of sports and society and your work to emphasize international perspectives in the Sports and Business Society course?
Thank you, Kelly Jo, and welcome everyone. I wanted to kind of set a frame to our discussion today as it relates to global perspectives of sports and society. Being a subset of society, sports impacts almost every field of life and almost every field of study. The intersections between sports and society are not new, nor are they exclusive to any country or place. Issues such as gender, race, politics, religion, or sexuality can be traced back to athletic competitions in ancient Greece starting 1776 BC. In the US, almost every significant social struggle manifests through sports. The civil rights movement, through athletes such as Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tommy Smith, and John Carlos, among others, influencing Black Lives Matter, Colin Kaepernick, and dozens of athletes protesting against police brutality and racial injustice. And with every strive for change, there is imminent backlash. The fight for free speech manifests not just through on-field protest, but also through attempts to control the narrative of America. As one of the most contested issues these days is the use of critical race theory in the education system, lessons often used when analyzing power dynamics in college sports. The women's rights movement led to Title IX and the growth of women's sports in America, and to Billie Jean King, fighting for having a professional women's tennis tour and for gender equality, which is an ongoing struggle that now manifests with the US women's national team players breaking commercial barriers and redefining meanings of equal pay. The Me Too movement manifested through Michaela Maroney, Ali Reisman, and Simone Biles, who do not only seek justice for the hundreds of gymnasts who were sexually assaulted by their doctor, but demand accountability from the organizations who enabled it. Such power struggles are, of course, not limited to America, nor did they necessarily start in the United States. Athletes prioritizing mental health, the rise of popularity of esports, building bridges between communities in war zones through sports, or communities around the world voting against hosting the Olympics, are just a few of global manifestations of the intersection between sports and society. Issues such as corporate social responsibility, climate change, the role of social media, and the short-term and long-term implications of the COVID-19 pandemic have local, national, and global implications, including on the way sports is being practiced. Through its athletic traditions and the commercial and innovative success of its alumni, the University of Oregon contributed to the branding of Eugene, a small college city in the Pacific Northwest, as Tracktown, USA. Thus, the connections between sports and society are very much integrated in the Duck's DNA. In the core Sports Business and Society, we analyze such intersections, and in this panel, we will try to explore and discuss some of the ways sports and society manifest in different cultures and countries around the world. So thank you very much for being with us. I hope you find the discussion thought-provoking. And now I think it's time to meet our alumni panelists. Patty Jo?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, so here are our panelists. Thank you very much, Joe. So joining us, we have a panel who's working and around the world and from around the world here in the US, both. So we are joined by Christopher Scheller, who got his degree from the UO in '97, who's Regional Head of Footwear Development Asia at New Balance. We have Jeff Sharma, '09, who is Senior Global Commercial Director for EA Sports FIFA at Electronic Arts. We have Jessica Hall, 19, who's a 3-time All-American and 2-time NCAA cross-country champion, who just got to compete in the Olympics in Tokyo. And Alejandra Gutierrez Aliano, she is a 15 graduate of the UO, who is a communication, international media, and operations manager, whose experience includes NFL game operations in Mexico and NFL Films International Operations and Project Management. We have Akbar Akhtar from 2017, who's a senior consultant in the area of sports at PricewaterhouseCoopers India. And finally, we have Jilong Alex Su, 2017 graduate, who is a digital marketplace operation manager for Stretch at Nike. So thank you to all of you panelists for joining us from wherever you are in the world today. And Yov, I invite you to go ahead and get the discussion started with our panel.
Thank you, Katie Jo, and thank you to all the panelists for being with us. I will start with an introductory question for everyone. Alex, I'll start with you. How did your time at the University of Oregon and in the US shape your career trajectory working in sports?
Yeah, I think I feel like all the fellow Ducks that is sitting here have the same feeling because I was born and raised in China and moved to the States. So when I first got here, my childhood is pretty much all studying, just not lying. And so like being here, I really got exposure to a lot of sports events that UVO that is happening in UVO. And also all the influence from Phil Knight that make a lot of invest in Nike, in UVO, made me realize, well, I have a thought, what if I can work in the sports field and ideally Nike. So having those ideas and also those information surrounding you really kind of like shape your thoughts about your future. And then that really inspired me to choose work in the sports field, even though I'm not directly working with all the athletes, but I do think, seeing all the sports events and then also studying at UVO made me feel like I can make some contribution in the sports business, not directly to the athlete, but also people that is interested in sports and how I can help them to get what they need. So I think that is a couple of the reasons that I feel like my experience in UVO have shaped my career aspect, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Alex. Christopher, same question. How did your time at UO and in the US shape your career trajectory through sports?
Yeah, it's first of all, thanks for having me on the panel today. It's great to reconnect with so many Ducks out there. Yeah, so I mean, my background in sports, goes back as a student athlete in high school. My father was employed at Nike back in 1991. And, I worked my first job for Nike in the Wilsonville distribution center, and packing shoes. Then went on to the University of Oregon, where I competed in triathlon and represented U of O at the National Collegiate Triathlon Championships. I worked in the Aquatic Center for 4 years as a lifeguard and was on the staff there. And was in the marching band for 4 years as well. That experience in itself was very exciting. Being able to go to the Rose Bowl with the U of O football team, and then the fact that having that he was working at Nike at the time, and Nike has their skybox, and it was a treat for me to go up after the halftime show up to the skybox and occasionally run into Phil Knight and some of the Nike executives there. So tremendously influential. My background or my degree is in anthropology, and my first job at Nike in '97 was to be able to take what I was doing, studying culture via anthropology, but then apply that to the sneaker consumer, to athletes, and then my passion just for getting actual product, looking at what athletes do, how they use the product, taking my own experience and just really helping support athletes achieve their goals, whether that's their fastest 5K or winning gold medals in the Olympics. And it's been fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Christopher. Alejandra, welcome. Again, the same introductory question for everyone about your time at UO and how it shaped your career trajectory.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with everyone. Nice to see some fellow Duck alumni. And to answer your question, I think the strongest influence Oregon had on me was not only the culture that it has, due to, as they've said before, all the influence that Nike and Phil Knight has had on the university, but my final year, which was my senior year, I started working for the athletic department, doing promotional videos, recording, all that stuff. And with that, I was, I think, just pulled in deeper into the world of sports, because I got to be with all the teams during the ups and downs. I got to see how things work behind the scenes. And I think that set me on the path, not only of interest, but also the expertise to later on, once I graduated, start dabbling my feet into the actual world of sports. So I think definitely the experience of being in Oregon and all that it has to offer really shaped my path, and it got me to where I am now.
Well, we're very happy that you're here with us. Thank you. Jessica, what's up?
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Thanks for being with us.
I'm a very proud Duck, so I love the chance to come back and give a little bit of time back to the school and a program that gave so much to me. So I appreciate it. Yeah, so I am a recent grad. I took this class 3 years ago now, and I loved it. I think I wish I kind of got involved in the sports marketing area a little bit earlier, and maybe I would have gone a bit further with it. But it was a great elective towards the end of my degree. So I moved over to the US in 2015 from Australia, where as a track and field athlete, it's a very individual system back in Australia. So to come across and kind of be immersed amongst a team with great coaches, great people to run with every day, great support staff, it was pretty eye-opening and incredible to see how they valued the whole student athlete. They wanted you to succeed in the classroom and succeed on the track. And you were basically gifted with 15 of your best friends that you got to run with every day. So I think I, from a young age, had always aspired to be an Olympian, but the Ducks and my time over in Oregon definitely made that possible. And I owe a lot of thanks and gratitude to my friends and my teammates during that time. But yeah, I think for me, it wasn't too much of a culture shock being Australian. I spoke English, same sort of culture growing up, and even Eugene itself felt like home. So I adjusted pretty well into the University of Oregon. And that just kind of set the tone for what was to come. And as in 2019, I graduated and had the opportunity to sign with Nike and stay in the state of Oregon, which has been home for 7 years now, which is quite crazy. It's gone very fast. But yeah, my time as a student athlete at Oregon opened plenty of doors for me to continue along my way.
Well, always a pleasure of having you back. Akbar, how about you? How did your time at UO and in the US shape your career trajectory? Sorry.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to see some of the alumni and the faculty and the students of the UO, and brings back all the pleasant memories I had. I graduated in 2017, and at that time there weren't too many people from India who had a kind of a global degree in sports business or management, and the experiential learning which I got during my time at the UFO is pretty much really what helped me bring a global kind of global outlook towards the sports industry. And the visits we had to various parts of the country in the US and also internationally, they kind of helped me shape a very dynamic global outlook towards the sports industry and role as a company in the sports industry. That's what sets me apart, because now we're able to consult some of these clients in India, and having that background, having that degree is what the clients appreciate, and it really it helped me kind of set my foot in the industry in India and kind of bring as I mentioned, the global perspective into the sports industry, and help set me apart.
Thank you, Akbar, for joining us. Thank you all for introducing yourself and telling us about your very inspiring journey. And so now let's start the discussion going and try to see how talk about some of the intersections between sports and society and how you experience them through your work and your career. And I'll start with you, Alex, as working for Nike, because over the years, Nike's approach to social activism, and especially on race, has changed. If in the 90s and early 2000s, the focus was more on performance, in the last few years, there is somewhat of a shift and emphasis towards activism and supporting athletes who challenge the status quo, such as Colin Kaepernick and others. Alex, where and how does this shift and other social struggles guide or influence your work with Nike?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dubinsky. That's a really good question. I feel like before Nike is, which you're right, that is heavily evolved with the term performance. But more and more we have to start think about the performance is basically meaning people need to have the same resources to start together. And for people with color that is living in all different conditions, that they don't have the same access to certain resources, that people is not starting at the same place to enhance their performance. So I'm really kind of like appreciate Nike that start caring more about the social status, especially racial, building that equity and share awareness and let people know what is happening right now. And then as one of the people with color, I really appreciate that a company is willing to risk the brand reputation doing that, and also share awareness with general public about what's being happened, so we can put more resources and help into our ally. So I think that really inspired me to learn more about all the unfortunate event that is happening, because I have a very deep international background, because in my home country, I don't see a lot of these happening. So it's just really inspired me to, study and revisit what's going on right now, and also admire that, a company that is willing to do this and just gain my buy-in, I guess. And also not only for racial, it's also, I feel like Nike is very care about where it's social events. Also, that happened not too long ago when Naomi Osaka refused to do the press conference, and people, well, tend to focus more on the athlete mental health, and then also mental health is one of biggest challenge here. And I just realized all those campaign is really, I can feel related, and then I'm really proud to say that a company that is having my back. So that also influenced me why I want to stay with Nike, maybe a little bit long term. So not sure if that answered your question. But.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Alex, and good luck. I want to remind you and everyone who's joining us that after the sound of questions, we will take questions from anyone who's interested or who's following us. So please write your questions in the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go through this discussion. Christopher, I'm moving over to you. What are some of the cultural, social, and business adaptations you needed to do when working with the Asian market?
Yeah, I mean, first I'd like to start off, as I'm with New Balance, as you mentioned, been with that company in Vietnam since 2014. So, New Balance has an amazing mission statement, and, that is, independent since 1906. We empower people through craftsmanship, create positive change in communities around the world. And, that's something that the company and everyone, all of the associates really believe and get behind. I think for what I do in the development and manufacturing world, where, I'm working with the headquarters teams, the design teams, whether they're based in Boston, Tokyo, or the UK, and getting those tech packs, those new creative ideas. And I'm working with people at the factory level, at the owner level, on creating, making these designs into reality. And, they may not have ever run in their life, right? They may never have played this sport. And, you're trying to convey all the needs and communicate with them, here are the product attributes. This is why we're trying to make this unique and special, not only for the athlete, but in relative to a competitor product in the market. And then, working with the development teams all the way through down to the stitchers on the floor, and how do you, express and convey what you're trying to achieve, and through multiple languages. I may be working in a Korean factory, as I am right now. I'm in Jakarta, working with a Korean-owned factory. So management is mixed between Korean and Indonesian, and the majority of the workers, are Indonesian. So it's pretty exciting that way. I think other adaptations are, a lot of support and emphasis given to activism in those communities, whether it's sport days, connecting on different human rights issues, and labor rights are also very key in the manufacturing world. So those are really some of the challenges that we're dealing with every day. And certainly COVID has not made that any easier, taking extreme caution and protocols with testing at work sites. Vietnam is currently trying to slowly reopen, but they're challenged, right? They got vaccinations a lot later than other manufacturing countries, and working through that right now as well.
Thanks, Christopher. Very interesting. Alejandra, in the US, American football is the most watched sport. The Super Bowl plays a role as almost as a civic religion and a celebration of American culture and commercialism. Alejandra, what kind of challenges and opportunities do you encounter when working with the NFL in Mexico?
That's an excellent question. I think there were a lot of challenges and opportunities that I experienced while working at the NFL in Mexico. And I think one of the main ones was, as you say, in the US, American football is embedded into the culture. There's Sunday night football, there's Monday night football. But in Mexico, even though there are a lot of super fans, football is not part of their daily life. It's not a ritual, it's not a tradition yet. So I think it's one of the biggest challenges was to find and make like bigger marketing efforts to see how we could find a new audience, how we could grow them, how we could nurture them. And because you're dealing with a different audience in a different part of the world, of course, you're going to have to try different approaches, because there are people that really care about the game, who's playing. And in 2016, for example, the NFL games went to Mexico. So it wasn't only transmissions. And so that really changed everything that we had been working on. And with that, we had to target the people that were super fans, but also the new audience, maybe people that never really participated or knew much about football, but they wanted to start getting involved. So we worked around like the marketing, the communication, all the events at the stadium to please the super fans, but also make it a family event, something that could be done every single year that people could look up to. Like, oh, the NFL Mexico games are here. It is super fun because I can go with my family and we can watch the game, and there's something for everyone. There's food carts. So I think that was definitely one of the biggest challenges, just finding ways to make it a good experience for everyone. And I think also logistically with that first game, we had to do everything from scratch, from planning the airport routes, what airport they were going to arrive at, the stadium security. We had to redesign the field so that it would meet the NFL standards, as well as the locker rooms and safety. So we had to do everything from scratch, which was definitely a challenge, but I think it was something really, really fun that yielded amazing results, because not only were we able to bring football into the lives of a lot of Mexican people, but also we got to bring different parts of the country into that world. So we got to work with the tourism, the biggest foundation of tourism in Mexico City. We got to work with political officers and people in banks as sponsors. So we got to bring the whole country together for this big event. And after those games started, the transmissions increased, which was always really, really exciting. And as far as opportunities go, as I mentioned before, because you're dealing with a new audience and you're still growing it, you're still nurturing it, you never know how they're going to react. And people in the US and Mexico and London, because there's also an office in London, people are going to react differently to the same thing. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity to determine what makes people click in different parts. So I think that's been something really amazing to see, because I can see how it's been in the different offices all around the world. So I think it's something that really somehow brings people closer together, regardless of where they are.
Thank you. I want to welcome Jeff Sharma to our panel and ask Jeff to introduce himself. How did your time at the University of Oregon shape your career trajectory?
First of all, sorry I had to be a little bit late, had meetings, but nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I mean, I think I would say for me, I was interested in sports. I was at EA before, so Electronic Arts on the EA Sports side for video games, on the production side, but I was interested in learning more about marketing. And so I did my MBA in 07 and 08 and graduated in the spring of 09. And what my time at Oregon allowed me to do is to really understand the broader landscape for how you can be involved with sports. That, you know, typically you think, okay, well, maybe you need to be on the league side or on the team side or on the sponsorship side or on an agency side. And, you know, what I came to learn during that time, and which I since explored afterwards, was that for me, I really enjoyed being on the brand side. And, you know, being able to manage a brand that was deeply entrenched in sports. So not necessarily your more typical pathway, but a way to stay connected with something that you're really passionate about. Because for me, sports has kind of been the common DNA through everything that I've done in a very varied career to this point. And by way of introduction, I probably should have mentioned this first. So I lead the FIFA franchise globally on the commercial side, but I've also led it on the brand side previously as well. So I know that business quite well, and I'm sure some of you are very familiar with that football game on a global scale.
Thanks for joining us. Jessica, former student of SBUS 250, a former student of mine, always a pleasure reconnecting. The American sports system is significantly different than the international one. The path to professionalism goes mostly through the education system rather through sports club. Title IX, an amendment to the education law from the 1970s, prohibits gender discrimination in federally funded academic institutions, which led to a significant growth in women's sports. Jessica, as the elite athlete in this panel, what kind of different intersections between sports and society have you encountered when competing in Australia or in international competitions? And how are they similar or different to the one that you faced when competing in the US as a duck?
Yeah, so I think I'm coming into sport. I am involved in sport at a time where women do have equal opportunity, and that is a lot of thanks to the Title IX movement and the opportunity that gives to student athletes nowadays to succeed. I know at the University of Oregon, we create an incredible environment for female student athletes, from just like female coaching staff all the way through to the Women in Flight program that we have, that just creates such a supportive environment and encourages you to have equal opportunity to go after your dreams. I would say that there is quite an intersection between my time in Australia and my time as a professional athlete, as well as my time as a duck into being a professional athlete. There's some similarities and some differences along the way. And I would say in Australia, at the club-based system, you are very individual. You don't quite have the support network or the team around you unless you take control and you build it yourself. Whereas kind of at the University of Oregon, you are just immersed as part of the team for 4 or 5 years, however long it takes you to complete your eligibility. So you can replicate that in Australia. It's just a lot harder to do. And we don't quite have the resources that the University of Oregon does. So I would say transitioning into the professional world, you are back out there as an individual. Like the team isn't taking to the track with you. Your coach is on the sideline. When you line up on the track at the start line, it's you, and it's whether it's a good day or a bad day, it falls on your shoulders. Whereas as a team in college, you kind of carry each other, and it does eliminate a little bit of that stress. So I would say that the biggest intersection between club sport system in Australia and professional athleticism is that you do remain a bit more in control of your own individual success. Whereas my time in the NCAA, where you're in an education system that does lead to professionalism as well, is that as what I learned in the NCAA as a student athlete has kind of been the platform for my success as a professional so far. Like you really are lucky enough to be in a pretty professional setting, and you're just combining it with your academics while you're in college. So I learned a lot about the value of sports psychology, recovery methods, being able to nail certain workouts for the week and knowing when to back off and when to recover. Like those skill sets are definitely transferable into the professional environment, and they've taught me how to kind of structure my week and recover best, and how to line up and race against top competition. The NCAA is one of the strongest competitions in the world, especially in track and field. It's very, very hot competition, and you learn a lot tactically about yourself and competitors and how to race. And that is the biggest thing I noticed when I went to my first international championship in 2019, a couple of months after graduating, and just the skill set of racecraft I had learned in the NCAA transferred onto that elite level stage so well. And I know that if I had have never taken the chance to come to the US, I would have been quite starstruck out there and a little bit like, what do I do now that I'm here? But the NCAA definitely developed a platform for me to learn how to race and take control of what I can control. So I'm very grateful for what I learned in my time in both systems, but I do think the NCAA is the path to take if you're trying to be a top level athlete in the future.
Well, it's always a pleasure seeing you compete as well. Akbar, The sports culture in India is significantly different than the one in America. For example, cricket is relatively not one of the most popular sports in the United States, while in India, athletes are idolized and the national team is among the best in the world. How do social issues such as gender, race, and diversity in sports in India manifest through your work with sports? For example, can you share how your Celebrating Women in Sports infographic series during the Tokyo Olympics came about and how you may hope to build upon it in the future?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the biggest or two of the biggest challenges that India as a society faces, one of them is poverty, and the other one is that it's a very patriarchal society. And when you look at the accomplishments of India in the Olympics, you think that wouldn't be the case, because the medalists, they come from very poor backgrounds, and the majority of them are women. So, we looked at what are the global institutional initiatives available for athletes, during the Olympics. Whoever was doing well, winning medals, we picked up some institutional initiatives that have helped those athletes do well. You mentioned the Title IX in the US, which allows for equal funding for both men and women programs. Or, for example, there's a fund for young girls to compete in water sports in Oceania. So some similar initiatives we picked up, and we are taking those to the sports administrators in the country, and they are appreciating the fact that there are these global initiatives which have helped women athletes do well across the world, and using those to kind of propel more and more people into sports and help them kind of achieve excellence is what the goal of our series is. That we started during the Olympics, and now we've made that into a coffee table book that we have published, and we are taking to the various stakeholders. And you did mention that the Indian cricket team is idolized, and they treat it as they're very popular in India, and that is true. And now there's a big push from all the stakeholders in the country in sports towards promoting women's sport in general overall. So women's cricket is being promoted very strongly, and we as consultants, we are advising the Board of Cricket Control in India on how they can kind of scout talent, implement more initiatives to set up a better infrastructure to promote women participating in sports, and especially in cricket, and making that a global phenomenon. So there is a big push, and we want to be a part of it. We want to help break down these barriers, these initiatives, these kind of challenges that athletes face, especially who come from poor parts of the country, and women athletes. So hopefully in the long run we're able to achieve something, and this contributes towards some success on the global scale for the country.
Thank you. Very interesting. Jeff, I want to get back to you. Can you tell us more about your career path and how it differs from what most consider the typical sport business career path, and also talk a little bit about the sports gaming industry and how it plays a role in bringing people together, perhaps people who are unfamiliar with or lack access to in-person physical sports. Can you tell us about ways the gaming industry and projects you have worked on have played this kind of role to make sports more inclusive and diverse?
Good questions. Thank you. So on the career side, I think I might have touched on that maybe a little bit prematurely in my last answer. But very much understanding all of the different paths that you can take to be involved with sport, aside from the traditional ones that you may think before going to Oregon and being involved in courses such as this. For me, I started off actually on the development side, helping to make games, and then I moved to the marketing side, and now moving to the commercial side. And even with all of those different disciplines sort of under my belt, like, you're still always in contact with the sport and understanding what's happening and trying to tie into what's happening with the real world, which I personally am really passionate about and find very exciting. And so as it relates to, the second part was around, how sport influences society a little bit, particularly around diversity and inclusion. The really unique opportunity, at least at EA Sports, that I've been able to have is that our video games are like the digital manifestation of the sport. So, when you think of other sponsors for leagues, for example, like I worked on the UFC business for a little bit, and Toyo Tires is a sponsor, and they're just a sponsor because they actually want to access the audience that the UFC has. Whereas EA Sports is actually recreating the entire environment of the UFC, which is really interesting. And so I think, based on some of the trends that we've been seeing in the sport, we've been able to leverage those within the game in some senses. So I was quite proud of, working on UFC 2. This was like 2014 maybe, but we put Ronda Rousey on the cover, and she was the first global lead female athlete in EA Sports history. And that was something that we felt was really important, not only from, well-deserved from the merits that she earned in the octagon, but also from a sense of diversification and the fact that like we were working with the UFC to be able to raise the women's side of the sport as well as the men's. And then when we think about inclusion as well, one of the brand values that we have on the FIFA business is that, one of our visions is to be able to drive the world's game forward. And that's sort of two parts. One being we want the game experience to always be better. But the second is that we sit in a unique place to be able to influence the world of football as the digital representation that like a lot of kids who might not follow or play the real world sport yet can have access to the game through our experience. And so we've taken on a lot of initiatives around anti-racism with various partners. We highlighted the Ramadan Midnight League that happened in the UK, because those are all sort of stories and developments that are really important for elements of our player base. And I guess the final piece when we think about sort of diversity, inclusion, and accessibility into the sport is that from a development perspective, we've looked at a lot of different ways that folks who might have physical disadvantages can be able to play and enjoy the games as well, which I think, again, just helps expand your audience, because the whole point of video games is to be fun and to be able to experience joy, particularly around the world of sports. So in that sense, I've felt very lucky to be in a position where we have that kind of influence on what's happening in the real world and in actually the culture of the sport through people experiencing it through our games.
Thanks, Jeff. Christopher, I want to go back to you and touch a bit and ask you to touch a bit about sustainability. As New Balance has set bold sustainability goals for the year 2030, can you share a little about these initiatives and their challenges, especially in relations to current status quo manufacturing and marketing trends in Asia?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenging goals that New Balance as a company and a brand has put forth to achieve by 2030. A few of those involve materials and sourcing. So sourcing 100% preferred leather and 50% recycled polyester by 2025. Just to touch on that one, in the footwear and apparel, in the actual products, I feel we're actually on a track to achieve that. I mean, some of the challenges are, if you think about when we say 2025, right, that is product in the market 2025, which means we've got to be already starting on it, now, right? It's happening now. It's going to take time. It's, that product life cycle from design concept to actual production or delivery is around, a year and a half. We sometimes can accelerate things. But the great thing there is that, actually, even going back in my career with Nike, like sustainability at Nike, we were talking about that in 1999, right? About the future of the planet and this. And so what I've really seen is this progression of it not just being a good thing to do, like it's essential, right? It's essential from a business standpoint. Material suppliers and vendors are finding that, if they use recycled content, right, it's helping the environment, but it's also helping profitability. It's also helping their cycle time in terms of how quickly they can turn around an article to be used in another product. And I think, that's one of the, if you compare like New Balance and Adi and Nike, we're all quite large brands, right? And I think, it really is on the shoulders of the brands to really help drive this. And that's where you see the messaging coming from. I think, they're the ones, our brands are the ones influencing these factories, influencing the material suppliers, in terms of, driving home that this is what the consumers are looking for, and this is what we want to do as a company. And I think, if you, for smaller brands, that's more challenging, that may be more challenging, but, really the role of these bigger brands is we're really leading the way. I think some of these other, we can maybe share the link later, but it's on newbalance.com on our website. There's a section on green leaf products and these sustainability and energy goals. There's a lot, in terms of energy use. We have our lean manufacturing teams and collecting data, and even when we're developing a new shoe, and as we're looking at product layouts, where the components come from, do they come from inside the factory or from an outside vendor? What is the distance traveled? How many kilometers? What is the impact there? And, it's not just about a single element of product creation. It's not just about the environment that makes it impactful. It's all of these, speed to market, efficiency, as well as environment, that it really, these compound on each other to really make an impact, and will make it happen.
Thank you, Christopher. Definitely one of the key aspects and the future of where sports is going, and every industry now needs to address sustainability, climate change, and use of green energy. Now I would like to give the floor to Dupree and his class, if you have any comments or questions to the panelists. Dupree, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yor. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, you can. No. Yes. Okay. Can I get the mic? All right. Is it better? Oh yeah, perfect. First of all, thank you all the panelists to share your experiences and tell your stories, and that's amazing and also very interesting. We can see everybody has their own perspective, own experience on all the subjects, and then interesting enough, at least half of them really perfectly match our topics that we've been doing in the class on the social issues and through the sports lens. And then at the classroom here, we do have some questions, and I'll pass the mic to the students who have their own questions.
Hi guys, so this is Jordan, and I'm a diehard Nike fan, so I have a question for Alex Su. So my question is, when you're trying to have a job from Nike, so what's the key factor or special skills that they demand, or except reading, writing, this common skill? So what's the factor they pay most attention on?
Okay, well, thanks for asking. Yeah, I think, you have a passion for sports. Is that, for me, it's really, I think one thing, even when I was hiring, one thing will be, you will be very cross-functional. You think thing that is a little bit more strategic, you are able to see the big picture, because all the other skills we can train you for. That's not exactly what we're looking at. What we're looking at is really, you are able to navigate through ambiguity, meaning we have a task that we don't know what to do, and then you're able to connecting the dots and solve it. I think that is really one of the key quality that I can't say the entire org, but for us, that is something that we usually pay a lot of attention to. So not sure if that answers your candidate, but if you see any interesting role, you should just apply, because things happen and you never know. I'm not sure if that answers your question. So if you have follow-ups, please ask.
Yeah, you make perfect sense. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andy, and I'm majoring in sport business. So in business school, I have to take a lot of courses like operating, financing, and accounting, and so on. So for these courses, I have to remember a lot of equation, diagram. So my question is that how does these courses help you in the career? How these courses helping in your career, and any skills that can I have to master and that's my question. It's I don't have fixed person to ask. I just anyone can help me on this question.
I can kick off a response and then other folks can jump on. I would say that I think at this stage in your career, getting a broad base of skills is going to be really valuable, because the more that I see business growing, there's definitely a room for specialists, but there's also a strong demand for generalists who, like Alex said, can see the big picture strategically. And so if you can understand all of those different disciplines, even though you're not necessarily an expert, you can provide a lot more value in learning how to connect dots and be able to see the business from a broader perspective, as opposed to only seeing it from one lens, which, the more multidisciplinary and global these businesses get, I think that broad skill set becomes more and more valuable. But happy to have anyone else jump on.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I mean, I think, first of all, I think Phil Knight was an accountant, so there's nothing wrong with being able to count the numbers and do the math. And I think that is, data in business in terms of using data for decision making is becoming more and more important. How data is collected, whether it's online sales or just shipping product, delivering product. It's a lot of data analysis and not just being a data dump. So being able to really read and understand what's the important data. Even in manufacturing, there's a big push right now to collect data. But if you just keep collecting data and you don't really know how to use it, it's useless, right? And I think also to Jeff's point about having a broad perspective, I think, just a comparison of my own experience having worked for Nike, which is a massive amount of people, and then working for New Balance, which is much smaller, right? And, my time at Nike, you had the ability to be very specialized and very, very focused. But if you move on and you work for a small company or you're independent, you have to be able to do all, everything, from the beginning of the process, to the end. You've got to greet the customers and make the food in the back in the kitchen, so to speak. So having that ability to adapt and have that broad skill set, and then just problem solving, right? I mean, so much of what I am doing and the people I work with, having that ability to identify a problem and have a process that you work through to turn that problem on and off and solve it and turn and move forward to the next one. And that's what I would say for that. Yeah.
much. Do we have time for one last question from one student athlete to another? Do we? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name's Jeremy, and I'm studying business major, and I'm also playing like a club basketball team. Like it's like also like a JV team for the school. And I really have a question to Jessica that I know you were like pretty successful as a D1 athlete and also in the professional career. And I really want to know, how did you transfer your mindset, and also like what's the differences between like after you transfer as a professional athlete, after you jump into like becoming working at Nike, and then as a like working like in the sports path.
Yeah, so I think whilst I was at school and as a student athlete, I really made use of the resources that we had, from the tutor center all the way down to just like communicating clearly with my coach when I needed to have a bit of extra time to study that day. I definitely valued my academics as much as I did my results on the track. Like I wanted to get my degree, and I prided myself on some good grades along the way. So just kind of remembering to stay like open with your lines of communication. And I was very lucky that both coaches I had at the time truly understood that, and they trusted me to, if I needed to take a day away from practice just to get caught up with schoolwork and just run a little bit earlier in the morning and then spend the rest of the day hunkered down in the EMU and studying and getting ahead on assignments before we traveled that following weekend. I found that the more open I was with them about that, the more understanding and the more leeway they gave me with making sure school remained a priority for me. So yeah, I definitely think just kind of, I look back now and it is kind of hard to feel like how did you do it all? But I think the best way to do it is like embrace being a student athlete. Like this is what you're there to do. You want to get your degree and you also want to play your sport. It's just something that I feel like a lot of people just figure out how to do. And then you'll look back in 3 or 4 years once you graduate and you'll be like, wow, my days were jam-packed, but I'm so proud that I got through it all. So yeah, I think just remember that both are your priorities, and you can be a very successful student and a very successful athlete if you prioritize both, and you can enjoy it along the way too. So yeah, good luck.
Thank you. And I have to say I lied. Here's another question coming to you.
Hello, this is Eric. I'm majoring in advertising. I have a question for Jeff. So even though with the games like FIFA and 2Ks, they're sports related, but there are a lot of people that have like an opposite opinion that these games are taking away children's time and attention away from actually stepping outside and play the actual physical sport. I just want to know what's your take on that. And also with the games like FIFA, where, you know, for past couple of years, every single year, the games are like being more and more alike and the same with each other. What do you think is the future of this type of games? Like what could be a big break point for like a revolution of this kind of game? Thank you.
Good question, Derek. Yeah, I think the point about video games and activity being a concern is definitely a fair one, and it's one that we take seriously as well. I think as much as you want the game to be sticky and fun, you also don't want people to be playing at unhealthy levels. I'm a former, many moons ago, varsity athlete myself in Canada, and so I certainly value the activity and getting out there and actually playing the sport and encouraging it as much as you can. So we put a number of measures in place in games recently in terms of people being able to set limits for the amount of time that they actually engage, and parents being able to do that for kids, etc., so that they can enjoy entertainment in a healthy way, but not get too involved to a point where it's not healthy. We've also contributed to a number of programs that encourage people to get out and play as well. But I do think that's an important responsibility on behalf of video game publishers for sure as we move forward. In terms of how products differentiate over time, that's a really good point, because you think about some of the non-sports titles in the industry, and they come out maybe once every 4 or 5 years. And so there can be a lot of change and difference year to year, whereas sports titles have to correspond with the latest season. So the development cycle is invariably, much shorter, and it's harder to innovate. And so from a marketing perspective, it's certainly like making sure that you're communicating what's new as as a major benefit to give people a reason to be able to come back and play. I do think that like the two vectors that you always look at each year is quality and innovation. So like, how good is the game? How solid is the experience? How much fun are people having? And then what's new? And that can be in terms of features that you're evolving. That can be in terms of business models. And I think really where the industry is starting to go, but where the breakthrough is going to be is where there's a much stronger connection between, call it cloud gaming and mobile gaming and console gaming, because the console install base is, 100 and call it 150 million. If you count all the consoles out there, probably a little bit more. The mobile install base is over 3 billion. And so how are you, bringing those experiences to players in a way that's really meaningful and that's a connected ecosystem? I think, some products have made better strides than others towards unlocking that, but I think that's probably the future in terms of, business growth, but also just better convenience and a better experience for our players, which is at the heart of why we do what we do.
We have more questions? I think the students are okay at this moment. I do have one question for Jeff, though. Is it okay? We have the time. Perfect. So Jeff, recently there are more voice coming up, raising from athletes. Sometimes they may be not very well accepted worldwide. So professional leagues, they sometimes take a stand or make some statements, and sometimes influence the digital platform or video games as well. So from your perspective or from EA, let's say when some major professional league, they make a statement, how much they influence your platform, or where you draw the line between reaching out to customers and then do the right thing before or after the league made a statement, like, can you do anything about it? Or what is the dynamic relationship there? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Is there a particular example that you might be thinking of in terms of that I could sort of speak a little more specifically to?
Right. For example, let's say in the world of basketball, right? Like there has been some conflicts between NBA athletes statement or NBA statement and politics beliefs in China, right? And then NBA shut down in China, but what about the game world, right? Like there's still a huge base of like gaming fans in China. And then nowadays with the pandemic, there's also athletes, they have different beliefs on things. And then,
I think I understand where you're going. Thanks for clarifying. It's a really interesting question, and it's a very gray area because we very much try and take a position of not having a political sort of. It's tricky because it's like you don't want to get involved into a lot of the politics that are happening within leagues. I think there's certain causes, like I mentioned, anti-racism, et cetera, that we feel very passionate about and that fit with our company's core values. I think if there's a situation that happens with athletes that are involved in our game, if those athletes, like we have an athlete code of conduct, if there's a violation of our code of conduct, then we have to look at how we will respond in kind. But if it's not really, if it's more of a sport related thing, then typically what we'll do is we will, because we represent the authentic world of sport, we will lean on our licensors and our partners in terms of the actions that they might be taking. So if a player makes an outlandish statement and the club decides to suspend them, then what we might do if it was in a football case is sort of like, put that player on the bench as part of the natural lineups, because we are reflecting what's happening in the real world of the sport, as opposed to injecting a certain point of view that we have. We very much want to, like I said, positively impact the game, but not necessarily become embroiled in some of the political nuances that happen within each of those sports, if that makes sense.
I think you answered the question way better than the way how I asked it. So thank you so much. And I think we're good from the class, and giving back to you, Yorv and Katie Jo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dupree. We do have one person in the audience who's waiting to ask a question. So Eric Sumar, I've asked you to unmute. Are you able to unmute and go ahead and
yes,
ask?
thank you. Thank you, Katie. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
But not see
right.
you. Are you wanting to unmute your video? Or no?
Oh, okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting. I'm here, Eric Sumar from Indonesia. I do have questions for the panels, and basically there are two questions that I would like to ask. The first one is basically on the regulation side. I think, Chris, you've been in Indonesia, so you know how tricky it is to operate industry in Indonesia. So I just would like to know how, is there any special courses or like a free, a discussion forum whereby you can invite participants from the regulatory sides from each country, from different countries to have a certain discussion on how to better regulate sports industry better. And that's probably not only pertaining to the sports department as well, but probably you can invite the trade departments and all related, ministries that can be considered as participants in the sports industry as overall. Yeah, that's one. And second thing, the question would be on the esports, whether U of O is considering, doing focusing on the esports as well as one of the topic in the future. Yeah. All right. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, so it sounded, actually your first part directed towards me sounded like more of a future topic for the program for U of O to put together a panel like that, which I think is a great idea. The brands, as well as organizations like AmCham, which is American Chamber of Commerce, is working with other businesses. So there's a lot of national chamber of commerce within each of the countries, doing manufacturing committees, working with regional governments on regulations, working on the biggest one right now has really been focused on COVID reopening and what's the safe way to do that and protect the workers, protect their lives, their livelihoods. And that's been the main focus right now, especially in Vietnam, trying to reopen manufacturing slowly. I think if you go to any of the major brand websites, there are sections on our corporate responsibility that you can really read through in terms of what New Balance is doing for the communities that we make our products in, and it does touch on some of the regulations there as well.
All right.
Okay, and Yo, did you have one more question for the entire panel? I think you said maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
oh, sorry. My second question would be on the esports.
Sorry about that. Apologies.
No problem. Yeah, esport is something that the U of O is focusing on, and is it going to be something that the industry? Because esport is definitely a big growing industry at the moment. I don't know whether there's going to be a special focus on the esports, including the marketing as well. Yeah. Thank you.
I guess Yovio would be the only person who might have some kind of inside scoop on that. So
Oh, because I guess Jeff had to leave. The way that I see sports is definitely a growing industry, and the UO has adopted esports in the last few years through club level, and this is where the industry is going. If it was a way that the industry was looking at it more of a niche side, now the industry sees significant growth potential in esports. Actually, I would say that the IOC needs esports more than esports needs the IOC at this point of time, as the International Olympic Committee is trying to attract the youth. So there's definitely room for growth there. It's definitely growing. And if there was a stigma about esports, about unhealthy people sitting in their basement or whatnot, this is not the case at all anymore, as esports athletes are making significant amount of money. The industry is recognizing them, and gradually more and more, most of the professional sports team have some sort of an esports league or some esports affiliation, and more traditional sports leagues are trying to capitalize on some of that market.
Thank you.
I would also like to address the panel and ask whoever wants or everyone, as I'm sure that it affects all of your lives and career, because the pandemic has changed our lives. The way that we're even in this type of conference or classroom, this hybrid way of some in the classroom, some of us spread across the world, students wearing masks, the faculty wearing masks. I wanted to ask, how was your career and your work in sports impacted by the pandemic, as the world of sports had gone through significant impacts with events canceled or postponed or stopped. Manufacturing was impacted, the supply chain. How was your career impacted? How was your work in sports impacted? What do you need to do as we move forward and try to survive and go through it?
I can kick that one off.
Go for it.
I've been right in the middle of it, right even today. So, I was in Vietnam. I've been based in Ho Chi Minh City since 2009. And so when the pandemic first happened, Vietnam was really applauded for their efforts. They basically went with a zero COVID strategy, which meant that they closed all the borders. They limited any flights going in or out. Anybody that came into Vietnam had to go a mandatory 2-week quarantine with multiple tests before they were able to come out. And this was prior to the vaccine. So, and what ended up happening for me personally is that this summer, I'd been 2 years, that was unable to return home. And so we said, the vaccine is available in the US. So let's go get it, and went with the family back to, we still have a home in Portland, Oregon. And shortly after, so we were there in July, and then a few weeks later, things completely shut down in Vietnam. Even though we have, resident visas and all of that, we basically had to reapply. And that took several months. So that was going on since August. We finally got approval to return to Vietnam, but there are limited to no flights available into the country, right? So now we're looking at being away from our home, our pets, our friends, for 6 months. We're hoping to get back in January. Meanwhile, the entire business and supply chain, if you think of a chain of events going back to when there were the tariffs on Chinese, on the products made in China coming into the US. So there was a massive movement by footwear, apparel, electronics industries coming out of China and going into Vietnam. Right. So that happened, beginning 2018. And then you have the pandemic hitting and everything closing down, and Vietnam in particular being closed down for a full 3 months. And so my work life completely changed, and especially even working with our US headquarters, where the team in Boston couldn't go to the office. They were all work from home. But during those early days of the pandemic, Vietnam was still very much open. We were still making, but we were closed. So nobody could come in or out without severe or very restrictive quarantine regulations. My day consisted of waking up in the morning, having phone calls, video calls with the team in the US, because Boston is about 12 to 13 hours different in the time zone. I would go out to the factory, come home and have dinner with the family, and then get on another phone call in the evening. And that went on for over a year, right, during those days of the pandemic so it was quite intense. But we were really intently focused on keeping the product moving. During that time, we also needed to accelerate our digital investment. So how we were communicating using digital photography or 3D design in product, and using that to communicate and really just create the new product that we were trying to achieve, as well as sending out photos or these 3D virtual representations to our merchandising and sales partners across the globe that were still selling in product. I think most of the people in the US probably experienced, like, if you wanted to buy running shoes or bicycles or any type of outdoor sports equipment, those things quickly evaporated out of the market. And so we were in Vietnam continuing to try and catch up with the market. I could do a whole hour, but I know we don't have time, but it's been quite intense.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to share some of your experiences during the pandemic?
Dupree here.
Sure.
Since I'm also a Nike duck, I can piggyback on the how I feel post-pandemic area. So actually, before the pandemic, Nike is already shifting to focusing on digital platform a lot more. And the way I feel is, like, after the pandemic, we definitely focused on the human being a lot more, not just customers, but also like employees as well. So externally, we actually planned a whole strategy how we leverage on the Nike Training Club, which is an app teaching consumers or customers how to work out at home, right? Because that's when all the gyms are closed. We had a whole strategy plan how to leverage that to boost the sales, to promote training category. But then pandemic hits, and Nike made a decision that we're gonna keep the Nike Training Club app forever free. That meaning all the contents now, like, even better prepared. You see, we hired all the trainers, athletes, and everything, and now this is just a free gift to all the athletes, as Nike saying, if you have a buddy in athletes, right? Like, to all the athletes around the world. So we're trying to take care of our customers. Meanwhile, we're trying to take care of each other as well. So from the leadership team, we all understand, even though we can work from home, sounds pretty sweet, right? Like, you have your family around you, you have your dogs, cats around you, but still, it's a different type of stress. It's a different type of working environment, and then it still causes effects on people's mindset and everything. So from all department, all kinds of different levels, that the leadership team really encourage us to take a break, right? Like, if you feel you need to take a break, if you feel you don't want to, like, keep your camera on during a Zoom meeting, just do it. Do the right thing and take care of yourself first. So we do feel like, okay, even though it's kind of so-called dangerous out there because of the pandemic, but we are capable of taking care of ourselves and then taking care of our business as well. And then, of course, the supply chain, because I'm in the supply chain industry, and because of the pandemic, manufacturing capabilities is jeopardized. But because we understand this and we are trying to take advantage of, even though things are not going as planned, We are just trying to make it work. We probably not gonna have all the demand we need, but there's like before, for example, it's always performance and the solution result oriented, right? But now, as things going, we are just like more understanding. We have more sympathy on each other. I just feel sure pandemic is a crazy thing happening right now, but there's some like movement happening around us as well.
Akbar, would you like to chime in?
Yes, sure. So for us, as consultants to various clients in various industries, including the government, including private sector, sports organizations, grassroots sports training providers, it actually gave us an opportunity to do a lot of goodwill in the industry. We developed some solutions that we took to the government in India and also to some private sector players who wanted to, pivot from physical offering to a digital offering. And, given that everything was shut down, so they had to get their athletes, the government had to get, training out to their athletes, the private sector players had to get the training out to their, grassroots athletes. So it actually gave us an opportunity to develop some solutions in the market. And, a lot of people have had some very intense experiences having to deal with a lot of uncertainty and shutdowns. But for us, thankfully, it was a good time for doing business, because we did a lot of work pro bono as well. Because we understood how difficult the times were for all our clients, and through that we've been able to develop a new kind of offering, and we're taking to market now and monetizing. So for us, thankfully, we were able to use that as an opportunity to grow further in the industry.
Thank you, Akbar. Alejandra, do you wanted to chime in as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think, as many people have said, the pandemic definitely changed a lot, especially in attending games or attending any sports events. And I'm seeing it a lot in London, that, well, now that things are reactivating, it's part of the new normal that we have to get used to. Things have changed. Players now have to take several COVID tests all the time. People have to take COVID tests before they enter a stadium. So I think for a while things did slow down a little bit, but I think that really reignited the passion that people feel for sports, because you can watch something in a transmission, but it's not the same as being there in the stadium, being next to someone that is that cheers for the same team that you do, or is part of the opposite team. So I think, as horrible as the pandemic has been, I think now that things are slowly starting to go back to normal, it's brought people closer together, because they now remember what they used to have and they want to treasure it even more now. So I think also with all the technology that has been developed, I think the future it looks very exciting, especially with like esports, for example. It's going to be a massive explosion. So I'm very excited to see how things are going to move forward.
Thank you, Alejandra. Definitely one of the main impacts was attending events. This summer, I conducted research in Tokyo, and I remember months and months of anxiety, how to prepare for that, and the ongoing changes in the regulations and testing and what you can do and cannot do, and whatnot. And even during the games, it was very stressful, and regulations were changing over time. With that, I would like to thank one of our audience members here, Takuya Kuronuma, who after my final COVID test in Tokyo, that I knew that I can go back and take the flight to the US, helped me in the last day and showed me around the city a little bit, because during the games you could not really do anything beyond going to events. And speaking about Tokyo and the events, perhaps the person who is most qualified here to speak about preparations, and perhaps one of the highlights of my experience in Tokyo was to seeing a former student compete Jessica, how did the pandemic affect you? How was the Tokyo experience? Please share.
Yeah, so I think for elite athletes, throwing a curveball like pushing the Olympic Games a whole year seems like something you'll never ever have to deal with. It's so unprecedented that it was so hard to fathom until pretty much they did make the call end of March in 2020. When you did start to see the state that the rest of the world was in, it started to be pretty obvious there's no way we could have the Olympics in 2020. And that announcement kind of was probably met with a lot more anxiety than it was met with kind of easing of the mind. I think a lot of athletes felt this stress about, okay, now it's postponed, but are we postponed or are we cancelled? Like, is it going to go ahead next year? Is it going to be later in 2020? I think until they announced that they had a new start date 12 months later, I think a lot of athletes did feel that angst of like, wow, it might be completely taken away from us with no control over the situation. And I think a lot of people, athletes, academics, even just businesses, kind of the uncertainty was what was the stressor. So for us, once we kind of had a new date, it was way more kind of, you could start working backwards from that point in time and kind of restructuring the whole training and everything that was leading in. I was lucky in a way. I got to spend the most time in Australia I have in 5 or 6 years. As soon as kind of our government mentioned they were going to close the border in Australia, I jumped on a plane and went back. And then pretty much as Chris was in Vietnam, Australia was also operating under a COVID-0 stance. So for training and everything for that next 8 months or so, I was in a pretty lucky position because Australia was quite, and life was pretty normal. You wore a mask in a few places, and we did have pretty minimal cases compared to the rest of the world. The stories changed a little bit this past 6 months. Australia kind of went through the situation a bit later, but considering I was preparing for an Olympics in another year's time, I was in a pretty good place because life continued and I had access to tracks and gyms and everything as perfectly as I would have if COVID never had happened. So I knew I was very lucky when a lot of people in the rest of the world were not under those circumstances. So yeah, I got to spend a lot of time with my family back home. So I just tried to take the positives out of that. And as a young athlete in my second year as a professional, my coach kind of pivoted the approach and sort of said to me is like, an extra year for you is huge right now. Like, it's an extra year of experience, it's an extra year of training. Like, you're going to be prepared to not just go to the Olympics next year, you'll be prepared to do something when you're there, kind of thing. So I definitely, the goals got a little bit higher. And I will say I was so shocked to see Dr. Dubinsky in the media zone after my first round in Tokyo, because it just had seemed that felt so normal in a way, because I was just not expecting to see anybody that I knew. Like, I couldn't even have my family there or friends or anything. It was just so nice to see a familiar face. And I know he sent me some photos from within the stadium afterwards that my mom and dad were so happy to receive, because they were like, wow, it actually feels like we were there. Like, we could see what was inside the stadium. So definitely an extremely different experience from the COVID testing, all the way from getting on the plane and kind of being like, wow, we're actually going to Tokyo. I think for a lot of the time, a lot of us athletes leading in, we're like hanging on, being like, oh, it's still like, there's still a chance that it might get taken away from us at the last second. But yeah, once we kind of boarded the plane and that feeling of being like, wow, I'm going to the Olympics, I don't think I'll ever forget that one. Yeah, so it was definitely a very different sort of games, but the people of Japan and the people of Tokyo especially made us feel so welcome. And I think there was a little bit of stress from the outside before you entered Tokyo, kind of being like, what is this going to look like? But the people of Japan were incredible, and they definitely welcomed us with open arms and from afar. But they made it feel like a normal Olympics. And for me, I didn't have a comparison. It was my debut. So I think rather than being like, wow, it was the COVID games, it's like we're part of the history that was the COVID games. So yeah, if you look at it in a different light, you can take a lot of positives from it. But I definitely am looking forward to hopefully making another one in Paris in 2024 and seeing what what things look like when we hopefully do not have COVID restrictions.
And you broke the Australian record, if I'm correct, right? Making it to the finals.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also worth mentioning. Kathy Jo, the floor is yours to continue navigating the questions from the chat.
Okay,
and from the
fantastic.
audience.
Yeah, we have a hand raised from Ruli, who is joining us from Indonesia, I believe. So I've sent him a message to go ahead and unmute.
Okay, hold on. Start my video. Okay, yeah. So good afternoon or good morning here in Jakarta. Just finished running 5K. Just starting the pandemic, like the March 2nd here in Indonesia, 2020, and it gave me. I've been doing running and walking for, I think now it's the past 3 years for the running streak. Today is my 1,210 days streak. Every day is running at least 1 mile. And then the last 1 year is about 5 kilometers every day. So it's kind of nice for me now because working from home, and then I have a lot of free time doing my other stuff. So I have one suggestion. Since the pandemic, a lot of virtual running club or something like that with the application. I've been following Run Rock and Roll Virtual Run and also the World Marathon, the World Major Marathon. I was thinking maybe, I don't know, University of Oregon or maybe working with Nike and so on is making some kind of apps. So all the alumni all over the world can actually doing something like running or walking, something like that, and it's a participation of alumni all over the world. Because I've been trying to find like a lot more challenge, and so on. So maybe develop some kind of a simple app, and the token of appreciation after they finish is only like badge, and that's kind of something probably for me as an alumni of University of Oregon is kind of proud of. Okay, I've been doing this. The challenge may be like 100 miles or 100 kilometers per month, or maybe 25 miles per week or something like that. Nike doing it, but the app didn't really give that much option. It's only like, I don't know, 5 to 10 events every month. So because of this pandemic, I can do it almost every day now, and actually every day now, something like that.
Yeah, no, and I'm just seeing like our Indonesia Ducks. I know you've become very active in cycling as well, and got some special cycling vest tour together. So yeah, everyone's getting more and more active there. So yeah, you touched on something that would really be a great fit with. We've been posting some post-event information in the chat and some things that are going on here at the UO. And one of the things that we're working on is a big sport and wellness initiative, which integrates and increases the impact of a wide range of academic and just personal wellness to get University of Oregon into an international leadership position in the space. So there's going to be some big announcements about that sports and wellness initiative coming in the coming days. Unfortunately, they wanted to give me something to present here at the panel, but they didn't have it ready yet. But that's that would be a really beautiful thing to fit in with that initiative, though, if we did have something that could connect our alumni around the world in staying fit together.
Right, and I can probably after this, I can probably write down something more elaborate or something like that, and send it. My thought about that to you, and I don't think any other university in the U.S. Doing it now. Usually
I haven't heard of something like this, but yeah.
It can elaborate like running, cycling, swimming, and some other things.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you, Ruli. I do have one more person I'm going to call to the to the mic here, and that would be one of our faculty, Brian McWhorter, who's working on a project with students who are going to be working as ambassadors for people who are visiting internationally for Oregon 22. Brian, let me see if I can get you unmuted here.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, this has been a fascinating panel. I appreciate all of our guests very much. I'll just say that real briefly, in preparation for the World Athletic Championships, Oregon 22 in next summer, that I'm the faculty lead for about 250 students who will serve as cultural ambassadors for the more than 200 delegations that will be coming from overseas to Eugene. As everyone knows, this is the first time the World Athletic Championships have been held in the United States, much less in a small town like Eugene. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but the students are doing fabulous work, and we're very pleased with the program. We're very pleased with the opportunity that we're able to give the students for serving in this global engagement kind of paradigm. So yeah, happy to talk more to anyone who's interested. You can look me up if you like.
Great. And Brian, you've been working, you're potentially working with some of our international alumni in helping to train these ambassadors. Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, we just had a panel of 5 ICSP students this last week come to talk to our students about their own experience, how they felt kind of coming to Eugene from another place, how it went for them. And so it was really elucidating to the students to hear about that experience.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring that into this conversation, because it kind of can perhaps appeal to the students who are in Dupree's classroom if they want to take part in this program, perhaps, if it's not too late to do that. And also to our international alumni audience watching if they want to help kind of mentor and inform what's going on to train these ambassadors. So thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, so with that, I think we're about to wrap up. I do have here on my slideshow, I had one of our alumni from Singapore. One of Dupree's students was asking about employability and getting a job at Nike, and he kind of sent us like these are kind of overall general skills. And I can share that with Dupree's class afterwards, but these are some of the more, what we call kind of like soft skills that employers are looking for, and what you might want to think about when you're trying to go on that job search to Nike. So I do want to once again thank our moderators, Dr. Yob Dubinsky and Mr. Dupree Zong, along with Dupree's whole entire classroom for allowing us to crash their class today. I hope they really enjoyed it and learned something and got to have some new interactions that they can follow up on and ask some more questions if they want. Our panelists have been fantastic. I've been so happy to see you all after corresponding for a while, some of you for years without getting to see your face until today. So thank you so much for showing up, and you've provided some great information and insights with us. And we appreciate all you've shared to both inform our audience and inspire our students, and especially a big thanks to our panelists who joined from very far away and inconvenient hours, such as Alejandra, who joined us from London, and Akbar, who joined us from India. So with that, yeah, I would like to thank you very much, Dupree. I'll hand it over to you as a closing. Everyone,